In a small, quiet town where everyone knew each other's business, there lived a boy named Ethan. He was just 17 years old, but carried the weight of responsibilities far beyond his age. His father had passed away when he was young, and ever, since it was just him and his mom. She worked hard as a seamstress, stitching clothes for people in the neighborhood, but her health wasn't great. So, to help make ends meet, Ethan took up a job no one else wanted, being the janitor at his high school. Every day after classes ended, while most kids rushed home to hang out with friends or play video games, Ethan stayed behind, armed with a mop, broom, and a bucket. He cleaned classrooms, emptied trash cans, and scrubbed bathrooms until they sparkled. It wasn't glamorous work, but Ethan didn't complain. He knew how important it was. Without this job, they wouldn't have been able to afford rent or medicine for his mom. But life wasn't easy for Ethan. Some kids at school teased him because of his job. They called him Mop Boy and laughed whenever they saw him pushing a cart full of cleaning supplies down the hallway. Ethan tried not to let it bother him. He kept his head down and focused on what mattered, finishing his chores so he could go home and study. You see, despite everything, Ethan had big dreams. He loved tinkering with gadgets and machines, and he dreamed of becoming an engineer someday. Every night after dinner, he'd sit by the dim light of their old lamp, poring over textbooks borrowed from the library. Math problems, physics equations, and diagrams filled his notebooks. To Ethan, these weren't just subjects. They were keys to unlocking a better future. One afternoon, something happened that would change Ethan's life forever. As usual, he was mopping the floors near the science lab during lunch break. The room was empty except for two voices coming from around the corner. One belonged to a girl who always sat quietly in class, keeping to herself. The other voice was loud and angry. It belonged to Jake, the school bully. Everyone knew Jake. He came from a rich family and thought he owned the place. Kids avoided crossing his path, afraid of getting picked on. Ethan froze when he heard Jake yelling. "You think you're smarter than me?" Jake sneered. "That internship should have been mine. If you know what's good for you, you'll drop out," the girl stammered, trying to defend herself. I earned it fair and square," she said softly. "It's not my fault you didn't qualify." Jake stepped closer, his tone menacing. "Oh, really? Well, we'll see about that." Ethan peeked around the corner and saw Jake towering over the girl, his fists clenched. Fear gripped Ethan's chest. He knew what Jake was capable of. He'd seen him pick fights before, but he also knew he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Taking a deep breath, Ethan pushed his mop bucket into view and cleared his throat. Excuse me," he said, trying to sound casual. "I need to clean in here. Could you guys move somewhere else?" Jake spun around, glaring at Ethan. "What did you say, Mop Boy?" Ethan swallowed hard but held his ground. "You heard me. This area's off limits right now, school rules." For a moment, Jake looked like he might lunge at Ethan, but instead he turned back to the girl, jabbing a finger in her direction. "This isn't over," he growled before storming off. Once Jake was gone, Ethan approached the girl, who looked shaken. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, though her hands were still trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up." Ethan shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Don't worry about it. Just be careful around him, all right?" As the girl hurried away, Ethan leaned against the wall, letting out a shaky breath. He knew standing up to Jake wasn't the smartest move. He'd probably pay for it later. But deep down, he felt a sense of relief. At least he'd done the right thing. Little did Ethan know, this act of courage was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, rumors spread about what had happened in the science lab. Some kids admired Ethan for stepping in, even if they didn't say it out loud. Others warned him to watch his back, knowing Jake wouldn't forget what happened. And somewhere in the shadows, someone else was watching too. Someone whose influence would soon turn Ethan's world upside down. This expanded version keeps the story engaging by focusing on Ethan's daily struggles, his determination to succeed, despite challenges, and the pivotal moment where he stands up to the bully. The language is simple yet vivid, making it relatable and human-centric. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the next parts. Ethan's act of standing up to Jake might have seemed small to some, but it carried consequences far bigger than he could have imagined. The next day at school, whispers filled the hallways. Kids talked about what happened in hushed tones, glancing at Ethan as he pushed his cleaning cart from one classroom to another. Some looked at him with admiration, while others gave him pitying stares, knowing full well that crossing Jake was like poking a hornet's nest. Jake didn't let the incident slide. He wasn't the kind of person to forgive or forget. By the end of the week, Ethan started noticing little things. His locker would be jammed shut when he tried to open it. Trash would mysteriously appear on the floor near where he worked, and once someone even wrote "loser" in big letters on the back of his mop bucket. Ethan brushed it off as best as he could. He told himself it was just kids being mean, nothing more. But deep down, he knew Jake was behind it all. Things escalated quickly. One afternoon after finishing his rounds, Ethan headed toward the supply closet to put away his cleaning tools. As he opened the door, a wave of cold water splashed over him. Someone had rigged a bucket above the doorframe to tip over when opened. Soaked from head to toe, Ethan stood there, dripping wet, feeling both angry and embarrassed. A group of students, passing by, snickered, pointing at him. "Looks like Mop Boy needed a bath," one of them called out, laughing. Ethan clenched his fists but forced himself to stay calm. Losing his temper wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he grabbed a towel from the shelf and dried himself off as best as he could. As he walked back to the main hallway, he spotted Jake leaning against the wall, smirking. It was clear now. This wasn't random bullying. It was personal. Jake was making sure Ethan paid for stepping in. Despite the growing tension, Ethan refused to let Jake ruin his focus. Every evening, after finishing his janitorial duties, he went straight home to study. His dream of becoming an engineer kept him going. On nights when frustration threatened to overwhelm him, he reminded himself why he was doing this, not just for himself, but for his mom. She deserved a better life, and Ethan was determined to give it to her. One Friday afternoon, Ethan found himself alone in the science lab again. He was mopping the floor, lost in thought, when Jake walked in. This time, Jake wasn't alone. Two of his friends flanked him, their expressions menacing. Ethan's heart sank, but he didn't show it. He gripped the mop handle tightly, ready for whatever was coming. "Well, well," Jake said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look who decided to show up today." Ethan didn't respond. He kept mopping, pretending not to care. But Jake wasn't having any of it. In 2 quick strides, he was inches away from Ethan, grabbing the mop out of his hands. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Jake spat. "You humiliated me in front of everyone last week. Do you know how that feels?" Ethan finally spoke, his voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside him. "I didn't humiliate you. You did that yourself. All I did was tell you to leave her alone." Jake's face turned red with rage. Before Ethan could react, Jake shoved him backward. Ethan stumbled, trying to regain his balance, but the wet floor betrayed him. His foot slipped and he tumbled down the nearby staircase leading to the lab's lower level. The fall was brutal. Pain shot through Ethan's leg as he landed awkwardly on the hard tiles below. For a moment, everything went blurry. When his vision cleared, he saw Jake and his friends peering down at him from the top of the stairs, wide-eyed. Whether they were shocked by what had happened or scared of getting caught, Ethan couldn't tell. Without saying a word, they turned and ran, leaving him lying there in agony. It took every ounce of strength Ethan had to drag himself up the stairs and limp toward the nurse's office. By the time he got there, his leg was swollen and throbbing. The school nurse immediately called an ambulance, and soon Ethan was on his way to the hospital. X-rays revealed a bad sprain, but luckily, nothing was broken. Still, the doctor warned him to avoid putting weight on his leg for at least a few weeks. News of the accident spread like wildfire. Everyone at school heard about what happened, and opinions were divided. Some blamed Jake, accusing him of going too far this time. Others dismissed it as an unfortunate accident, saying Ethan shouldn't have been so clumsy. Either way, the incident cast a dark shadow over the school. Meanwhile, Ethan lay in bed at home, frustrated and restless. Not only was he unable to work, but he also couldn't attend classes. Missing school meant falling behind on his studies, something he couldn't afford. His mom hovered anxiously, insisting he rest and recover, but Ethan felt useless. For the first time in a long time, he wondered if all his efforts were worth it. Was it really possible to rise above circumstances like these? But then, something unexpected happened. A few days later, a car pulled up outside their modest house. Out stepped a woman dressed in an elegant coat, her posture confident yet kind. She introduced herself as Margaret Whitmore, a name Ethan vaguely recognized from news articles about wealthy philanthropists. "I heard about what happened," she said, sitting down across from him in their tiny living room. "I wanted to see how you're doing." Ethan blinked, unsure of what to say. Why would someone like her care about him? But as they talked, Margaret revealed that she'd been following Ethan's story for a while. She admired his courage and determination, qualities she believed deserved recognition. By the end of their conversation, Ethan realized this meeting wasn't just a casual visit. It was the beginning of something extraordinary. Margaret promised to help Ethan get back on his feet, offering resources and support he never dreamed possible. Though hesitant at first, Ethan eventually agreed to trust her. Little did he know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would transform not only his life, but the lives of those around him as well. This expanded version dives deeper into the emotional and physical challenges Ethan faces after standing up to Jake. It builds suspense and keeps readers engaged by highlighting the stakes and introducing a pivotal character who will play a major role in shaping Ethan's future. Let me know if you'd like me to continue expanding the next parts. Margaret Whitmore wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to show up at Ethan's doorstep. She moved in a world far removed from his. Mansions, private jets, and charity galas were part of her everyday life. Yet there she was, sitting in Ethan's modest living room, sipping tea from a chipped mug while asking thoughtful questions about his dreams, struggles, and plans for the future. Her presence was both comforting and overwhelming, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, but still leaving you squinting. Ethan didn't know what to make of her. Sure, he'd seen her name in newspapers before. She was one of those billionaire philanthropists who donated millions to schools, hospitals, and tech startups. But why would someone like her care about him? He was just a kid with a mop and a dream. The whole situation felt surreal, almost too good to be true. "I'm not here to waste your time," Margaret said after a pause, leaning forward slightly. "I've done my homework on you, Ethan. I know about your grades, your inventions, and how hard you've worked despite everything stacked against you. People like you don't come around often." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "People like me?" he echoed, unsure if he should feel flattered or embarrassed. "Yes," she replied firmly. "People who refuse to give up no matter how tough things get. You stood up for someone when it would have been easier to look away. That takes courage. And now, because of that choice, you're paying a price, not just with your leg, but with your reputation, your peace of mind, and your ability to focus on what truly matters." Her words hit home. For weeks, Ethan had been beating himself up over the fall, wondering if standing up to Jake had been worth it. But hearing Margaret talk made him realize something. Maybe his actions weren't meaningless after all. Maybe they mattered more than he thought. "So, what exactly are you offering?" Ethan asked cautiously. He didn't want to get his hopes up only to have them crushed later. Margaret smiled, a warm, genuine smile that put him at ease. "First, let's take care of the basics. Your medical bills will be covered and we'll ensure your mom gets the treatment she needs. No one should have to choose between their health and survival." Ethan's throat tightened. His mom's condition had always been a source of worry. They couldn't afford regular checkups or medications, so she often went without. Hearing that burden might finally lift brought tears to his eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. He didn't want to seem weak, especially in front of someone as powerful as Margaret. "But that's just the beginning," she continued. You deserve a chance to pursue your dreams without constantly worrying about money or survival. I'd like to sponsor your education fully, from high school to college, and provide access to resources most kids can only dream of. Ethan stared at her, stunned. Sponsorship, resources. It sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. Why would you do all this for me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because the world needs people like you, Margaret answered simply. Smart, resilient, compassionate individuals who see problems and try to fix them instead of looking away. Too many talented kids slip through the cracks because they lack opportunities. I don't want that to happen to you. For the first time in days, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. It was small, fragile even, but it was enough to push back the darkness threatening to swallow him whole. Still, doubt lingered. Accepting help from someone like Margaret meant stepping into uncharted territory. Could he trust her? What strings might come attached? As if reading his mind, Margaret added, There's no catch, Ethan. Just promise me one thing, that you'll keep being the person you are right now. Don't let success change who you are at your core. Her sincerity won him over. By the end of their conversation, Ethan agreed to meet with her again the following week. Margaret promised to introduce him to her family and discuss concrete steps for his future. As she left, shaking hands with both Ethan and his mom, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. The next meeting took place at the Whitmore estate, a sprawling mansion surrounded by lush gardens and towering trees. Ethan arrived nervously, wearing his best clothes, a pair of jeans and a button-up shirt borrowed from a neighbor. Standing outside the wrought iron gates, he hesitated, wondering if he belonged in a place like this. But then Margaret appeared, welcoming him with open arms and guiding him inside. Inside, the house was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, marble floors gleamed underfoot, and paintings that looked centuries old adorned the walls. Despite its grandeur, the atmosphere was warm and inviting. Ethan met Margaret's husband, Charles, a tall man with a gentle demeanor, and their 2 children, a teenage girl named Emily and her younger brother Alex. Both greeted Ethan warmly, treating him like an equal rather than someone beneath them. Over lunch, the conversation flowed easily. Margaret encouraged Ethan to share his story, from growing up in a single-parent household to working as a janitor while studying late into the night. At first, Ethan hesitated, worried he might sound like he was bragging or complaining. But the Whitmores listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and nodding along as if every detail mattered. You remind me of myself when I was your age, Charles said at one point, surprising Ethan. I didn't grow up wealthy either. My parents worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, but I learned early on that determination and grit can take you farther than any amount of money ever could. His words resonated deeply with Ethan. For so long, he'd felt like an outsider, someone destined to stay stuck in his circumstances. Hearing Charles talk about overcoming similar challenges gave him a renewed sense of purpose. After lunch, Margaret took Ethan on a tour of the house, ending in a state-of-the-art innovation lab tucked away in the basement. Rows of gadgets, tools, and computers lined the walls, all available for use. This is where our family experiments with new ideas, Margaret explained. And now it's yours too. Whenever inspiration strikes, feel free to come here and bring your inventions to life. Ethan's jaw dropped. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined having access to such advanced equipment. Back home, he pieced together contraptions using scraps and broken electronics scavenged from junkyards. Here, he could build anything he wanted, with precision and quality. This is incredible, Ethan murmured, running his fingers over a sleek 3D printer. I don't even know where to start, Margaret chuckled. Start wherever your heart tells you. Trust me, once you dive in, you won't want to stop. By the time Ethan left the Whitmore estate that evening, his head was spinning with possibilities. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to dream big, to picture a future where he wasn't defined by his past or limited by his circumstances. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. He knew that much. But with Margaret and her family by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came his way. Little did he know, His journey was only beginning. Challenges still loomed on the horizon, testing his resolve and pushing him to grow in ways he never anticipated. But armed with newfound support and unwavering determination, Ethan was prepared to rise above them all, one step at a time. This expanded version delves deeper into Ethan's emotional journey as he interacts with Margaret and her family, highlighting moments of vulnerability, gratitude, and inspiration. It keeps the tone relatable and engaging while maintaining a natural flow. Let me know if you'd like to continue expanding the next parts. Ethan's new life began to take shape in ways he never imagined. With Margaret Whitmore and her family firmly behind him, doors that had once seemed impossible to open started creaking wide. The first change came when Ethan returned to school, after weeks of recovery. His sprained leg was healing well, though he still needed crutches to get around. But the real difference wasn't physical, it was the way people treated him. Word had spread about Margaret Whitmore stepping in to help Ethan. Some kids whispered behind his back, calling him the charity case. Others looked at him with envy, wondering how someone like Ethan could catch the attention of one of the richest families in town. But there were also those who saw him differently now, not as the janitor or mop boy, but as someone brave enough to stand up for what was right. Teachers greeted him warmly, offering extra support if he needed it. Even Principal Harris pulled him aside one day, saying, "You've shown this school what true character looks like, son." Despite the newfound respect, Ethan didn't let it go to his head. He knew better than anyone that kindness and courage weren't about seeking recognition. They were about doing what felt right, even when no one was watching. Still, he couldn't deny that things were changing. For the first time, he felt a glimmer of belonging, as if maybe he wasn't so out of place after all. Margaret kept her promises. She arranged for Ethan's mom to see specialists who diagnosed her condition properly and prescribed treatments she'd never been able to afford. Within weeks, her health began improving. It was a small miracle, one Ethan hadn't dared to hope for. At home, their tiny apartment felt lighter, filled with laughter again. His mom often teased him about becoming famous, though they both knew fame wasn't what mattered. It was the chance to breathe easier, to dream bigger. But not everything was smooth sailing. Jake's father, a powerful businessman named Mr. Miller, wasn't happy about Ethan getting help from the Whitmores. To him, it was an insult, a lowly janitor being lifted up by people who should have stayed out of his business. When news broke that Ethan would be transferring to a prestigious academy funded by the Whitmores, Mr. Miller decided to strike back. One afternoon, as Ethan sat in the innovation lab working on a prototype robot designed to assist elderly patients, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Margaret. "We need to talk. Something's come up." Ethan's stomach sank. He hobbled upstairs using his crutches, finding Margaret waiting in the living room. Her expression was calm but serious. Beside her stood Charles, holding a stack of papers. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, dread creeping into his voice. Margaret sighed. "Mr. Miller is suing us, and indirectly, you, for defamation. He claims we're meddling in his family's affairs and tarnishing their reputation." Ethan blinked, stunned. "What does that even mean? I didn't do anything wrong." "You didn't," Charles reassured him, "but Mr. Miller sees our involvement as a threat. He's trying to intimidate us into backing off." The weight of the situation hit Ethan hard. All the progress he'd made, the medical care for his mom, the promise of a better education, the opportunity to pursue his dreams, could vanish if Mr. Miller succeeded. Panic bubbled inside him, but Margaret placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We're not backing down," she said firmly. "This isn't just about you anymore, Ethan. It's about standing up against bullying and injustice, whether it comes from students or adults. If we let fear dictate our actions, then we lose everything we stand for." Her words gave Ethan strength, but the road ahead was daunting. Over the next few weeks, the lawsuit dominated headlines. Reporters camped outside the Whitmore estate, eager for any scrap of information. Social media exploded with debates about privilege, fairness, and whether Ethan deserved the opportunities he'd been given. Some defended him fiercely, praising his courage and resilience. Others accused him of playing the victim, claiming he was milking sympathy for personal gain. Through it all, Ethan tried to focus on what mattered most, finishing his project in the innovation lab. Every evening he poured his energy into building the robot, determined to prove that he wasn't defined by controversy or wealth. The machine slowly took shape under his hands, a sleek, compact device capable of fetching items, opening doors, and providing companionship for seniors. It wasn't perfect yet, but it represented something far greater than its parts: hope. Meanwhile, Sarah, the girl Ethan had defended against Jake, reached out to him. She'd been quiet since the incident, keeping her distance out of fear of drawing more trouble. But seeing Ethan face such adversity inspired her to step forward. One Saturday afternoon, she showed up at the Whitmore estate, clutching a folder full of documents. "I thought you might need this," she said shyly, handing the folder to Ethan. Inside were pages of notes detailing Jake's past behavior. Instances of bullying, threats, and manipulation. Sarah had gathered them over months, too scared to speak up until now. "This is incredible," Ethan said, flipping through the evidence. "Where did you get all this?" "I paid attention," Sarah replied softly. "I figured someday it might matter. And I guess today is that day." Gratitude swelled in Ethan's chest. For so long, he'd carried the burden alone. Now, someone else was sharing it with him. Together, they went to Margaret, who immediately involved her team of lawyers. Armed with undeniable proof of Jake's misconduct, they prepared for the courtroom battle ahead. As the trial date approached, tensions ran high. Ethan wrestled with doubts, wondering if fighting back was worth the cost. What if they lost? What if the judgment went against them? Late one night, unable to sleep, he wandered into the garden outside the Whitmore estate. The stars twinkled, above, distant but steady. Sitting on a bench, he replayed Margaret's words in his mind. "If we let fear dictate our actions, then we lose everything we stand for." He realized something important then. This fight wasn't just about him. It was about every kid who'd ever been bullied, every family struggling to make ends meet, every person told they weren't good enough. If he backed down now, he'd be letting them down too. And that was something he couldn't live with. The morning of the trial arrived cold and gray, the sky heavy with clouds. Ethan dressed carefully, choosing a suit Margaret had bought for him. As he stood before the courthouse, surrounded by supporters, including Sarah, his mom, and the entire Whitmore family, he felt a strange mix of nerves and resolve. This was it, the moment where everything hung in the balance. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Lawyers argued passionately, presenting their cases to the judge. Evidence was examined, testimonies heard, and objections raised. Hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Finally, the judge announced her decision. "The court finds in favor of the defendant," she declared, her voice ringing clear. "All charges against Mr. Ethan Carter and the Whitmore Foundation are dismissed. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented, disciplinary action will be taken against Jacob Miller for repeated acts of harassment and intimidation." A wave of relief washed over Ethan as cheers erupted around him. People hugged, cried, and clapped, celebrating the victory. Outside, reporters scrambled to capture the moment, cameras flashing like fireworks. But Ethan barely noticed. Instead, he turned to Margaret, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered, "for believing in me when no one else did." Margaret smiled, pulling him into a tight embrace. "No, Ethan, thank you. You reminded us all what it means to be human, to care, to fight, and to never give up." In that moment, Ethan understood something profound. Life wasn't about avoiding storms, it was about learning to dance in the rain. With the Whitmores by his side, he had weathered the hardest storm of his life and emerged stronger than ever. This expanded version builds tension and emotional depth, focusing on Ethan's internal struggles, the legal battle, and the power of community support. It keeps readers engaged by blending personal growth with external conflict while maintaining a natural tone. Let me know if you'd like to continue expanding the next parts. The courtroom victory was a turning point, but Ethan knew it wasn't the end of his journey. It was just the beginning. Winning against Mr. Miller didn't erase the scars left by weeks of stress and public scrutiny. Every time he walked down, the hallways of his old school whispers followed him like shadows. Some kids cheered for him, others glared, still loyal to Jake and his family. The mixed reactions reminded Ethan that while justice had been served, not everyone believed in second chances or third ones. But Ethan wasn't focused on what people thought anymore. He had bigger goals now. With the lawsuit behind him, he threw himself into preparing for the prestigious academy Margaret had arranged for him to attend. It was a private institution known for nurturing talent in science and engineering, the kind of place where students went on to build rockets, design cutting-edge software, and solve real-world problems. For someone who once cleaned classrooms, after hours, stepping foot into such a world felt surreal. On his first day at the academy, Ethan arrived early, clutching his backpack tightly as he stood outside the grand entrance. The building looked more like a futuristic spaceship than a school, with glass walls reflecting the morning sun and sleek solar panels lining the roof. Inside, the buzz of excitement filled the air. Students chatted animatedly about their summer projects, robotics competitions, coding boot camps, internships at tech companies. Ethan listened quietly, feeling both inspired and out of place. "Hey, you must be Ethan." A cheerful voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to see a boy, around his age, approaching, wearing a friendly grin. "I'm Alex Whitmore, welcome to the academy." Ethan blinked, surprised. "Wait, you're Alex? From the Whitmore family?" "The one and only," Alex joked, extending a hand. "Mom told me you'd be joining us this year. Thought I'd come say hi." Relief washed over Ethan. Having someone familiar made the transition easier. Over the next hour, Alex introduced him to teachers, showed him around campus, and even helped him set up his locker. By lunchtime, Ethan felt less like an outsider and more like part of the group. Still, he couldn't shake the nagging fear that he didn't belong here, that sooner or later someone would realize he wasn't as smart or capable as the rest of them. His fears weren't unfounded. The coursework at the academy was far more challenging than anything he'd encountered before. Equations stretched across blackboards like puzzles waiting to be solved, and lectures moved at lightning speed. On his first math test, Ethan scored lower than he ever had in his life. Sitting alone in the library afterward, staring at the red mark scrawled across his paper, self-doubt crept in. "I can't do this," he muttered under his breath. "What was I thinking?" A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "You okay?" He looked up to see Sarah standing there, holding a cup of coffee. She'd transferred to the academy too, thanks to the scholarship she'd earned. Seeing her face brought back memories of the day everything changed, the day Ethan risked everything to protect her. "Yeah, I'm fine," he lied, quickly shoving the test into his bag. "Just adjusting." Sarah sat down beside him, setting the coffee on the table. "You don't have to pretend with me, you know. I've been there. Remember my first week here? I almost quit because I thought I wasn't good enough either." Ethan glanced at her, surprised. "Really? You seem so confident now." She laughed softly. "Confidence isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. Trust me, you'll get there. But you have to stop comparing yourself to everyone else. Focus on your own progress." Her words struck a chord. That night, instead of dwelling on his failures, Ethan opened his textbook again. He studied late into the evening, determined to understand concepts that had seemed impossible earlier. When he struggled, he reached out to classmates, including Alex and Sarah, for help. Slowly but surely, things began clicking. By the end of the semester, his grades improved, and he started earning praise from teachers who noticed his hard work. Outside of academics, Ethan dove headfirst into the innovation lab. The robot he'd been working on, the one designed to assist elderly patients, became his passion project. He spent countless hours tweaking its design, programming its functions, and testing its capabilities. Margaret often visited to check on his progress, offering advice and encouragement along the way. "This could change lives," she said during one visit, watching the robot fetch a dropped pen from the floor. Not just yours, but countless others. Her faith in him fueled Ethan's determination. He envisioned a future where his invention could make a difference, not just in fancy hospitals or wealthy households, but in communities like the one he grew up in. Places where resources were scarce and people relied on each other to survive. As months passed, Ethan found himself growing in ways he never expected. He wasn't just learning equations or building machines. He was discovering who he was meant to be. Confidence replaced doubt, resilience replaced fear, and gratitude replaced bitterness. He realized that success wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence, about showing up every day, even when the odds felt stacked against you. One evening, as he walked home from the academy, Ethan stopped by the park near his old neighborhood. Kids played soccer under the fading sunlight, laughing and shouting without a care in the world. Watching them reminded him of simpler times, of running barefoot through these same streets, dreaming of a better tomorrow. Suddenly, a voice called out behind him. "Ethan, is that you?" He turned to see Mrs. Patel, the owner of the corner store where he used to buy snacks after school. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Look at you, all grown up and looking sharp." Ethan smiled, embarrassed.
"Hi, Mrs. Patel, how are you?" "I'm doing well, thank you."
"And look at you. Everyone's talking about how you stood up to that bully and won that big case. You've made us proud, son." Her words warmed his heart. Pride wasn't something Ethan sought, but hearing it from someone who'd watched him grow up meant the world. As he continued walking, he thought about how much had changed, not just for him, but for the people around him. His mom was healthier, smiling more often. Sarah was thriving at the academy, finding her voice and confidence. Even the Whitmores treated him like family, inviting him to dinners and celebrations as if he'd always belonged. But Ethan also knew that true success wasn't measured by accolades or wealth. It was about impact, about leaving the world a little better than you found it. Inspired by this realization, he decided to take his journey a step further. During winter break, Ethan organized a workshop at the local community center. Using materials donated by the Whitmores, he taught kids how to build simple gadgets, mini robots, LED lights, and basic circuits. At first, turnout was small, but word spread quickly. Soon, dozens of children were showing up, eager to learn. For many of them, it was their first exposure to STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Ethan saw himself in their wide-eyed curiosity and boundless energy. "You think we could build a drone?" one boy asked excitedly during a session. "Absolutely," Ethan replied, grinning. "But first, let's master the basics, one step at a time." By the end of the program, several kids expressed interest in pursuing careers in engineering or tech. Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing he'd planted seeds of possibility in young minds. Seeds that might one day bloom into something extraordinary. Back at the academy, news of Ethan's workshop reached Margaret, who beamed with pride. "You're already paying it forward," she said. "That's what true leadership looks like." Ethan shrugged modestly. "I'm just trying to give back. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. Now it's my turn to do the same." As our spring approached, preparations began for the annual Innovation Fair, a showcase where students presented their projects to industry leaders, investors, and the media. Ethan poured all his energy into perfecting his robot, determined to make it shine. Sleepless nights became routine, but he didn't mind. This was his moment to prove not just to others, but to himself, that he belonged in this world of innovation. Finally, the day of the fair arrived. The gymnasium buzzed with activity as students set up displays, eagerly awaiting feedback from judges. Ethan's booth stood out, drawing crowds with its sleek design and interactive features. Visitors marveled at the robot's ability to adapt to different tasks, calling it groundbreaking and life-changing. When the winners were announced, Ethan held his breath. Third place went to a team that developed a water purification system. Second place went to a student who created a virtual reality app for education. And then came the announcement for first place. The winner of this year's Innovation Fair is Ethan Carter, for his assistive robotics project. Cheers erupted as Ethan stepped onto the stage, accepting the trophy with trembling hands. Tears blurred his vision as he scanned the audience, his mom beaming with pride, Margaret clapping enthusiastically, Sarah giving him a thumbs up, and Alex whistling loudly. In that moment, Ethan realized something profound. Success wasn't about individual achievements. It was about connection, about lifting each other up and celebrating shared victories. As cameras flashed and applause echoed, Ethan whispered to himself, "This is just the start." This expanded version focuses on Ethan's growth at the academy, his struggles and triumphs, and his efforts to give back to his community. It highlights themes of perseverance, gratitude, and the ripple effect of kindness.